Welcome, sports fans, to another episode of the Boba Joe Show.
Hello, Mean Gene. You're looking well.
What you talking about, Boba Hicks?
Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's keeping well there out in internet land.
It's a magical land.
A magical land full of sane and well-balanced people.
Yes, happy, well-adjusted people who don't make up bizarre things or start crazy fights online with people, which could be anywhere in the world or anyone if you look at the internet.
But yeah, we're here for some fun, some light, refreshing entertainment. And we're going to be doing a little bit of comic chat. You know, we don't usually chat comics on the Boba Joe Show. I know Johnny has done a few comic-related chats with Gojitron and others, but
I'm
this
usually
is
too
my
busy reading
first.
comics to talk about comics.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Fight Club.
But what
It's too busy.
we're here now, though. We're here today, and we're talking about covers. Some great comic book covers, you might say.
Yeah, and we're going to look at just like we've picked sort of like random ones that are sort of meaningful to us on whatever level or things that are memorable. We're not like trying to do like the all-time greatest comic book covers of history because that would be like a 10-hour talk and hundreds of pieces of artwork. This is just like what do we like that's fun and interesting and memorable. And so the first one up I've got, and I have to admit I've cheated because this is from Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli, year one. But this is some modern edition that I've not even seen. It's one of these artist editions where they did these big oversized ones showing off the artwork and that. So you can see actually got DC and IDW on there. So it's I don't own that book. I don't particularly want to own the book. I just picked it because it's got the nice bit of art that happens to be on the cover. That's not normally on the cover of the year one books. It's usually in the advertisements and the trailers of the print trailers that were leading up to the year one books. But whenever I think of year one, that's one of my all-time favorite pieces of Batman art where he's just standing there like real kind of like stoic and he's got the one hand draping back. And they used it in these series of teaser ads. You can see one of them here on the top right of the screen. We can see like Bruce Wayne sitting in a chair and this bat coming towards them. And they use this motif of this red. It was like basically a black and white image, but they use this bit of red and all these advertisements leading up to the year one. But they did a whole bunch of really cool, iconic pieces of art and covers for the year one stories. But just that single piece I absolutely love, and it just works great in the kind of ads and the comic. It works great if you want to blow it up and put it on a poster or something or have it a print. It's just a beautiful piece of art.
My curiosity is piqued now because I'm looking at the spine of that cover, and it's got artist's edition. I wonder. I'd imagine there's a lot of really nice, just extra illustrations and unused.
Yeah, they're very expensive books. I think they're about $100 each or something. I've never owned any of them. I'm aware they're around, but more affordable if you live in America. If you're in Australia, these kind of books cost a bloody fortune. But I'm glad they make them. It's good. It's like how Dark Horse does stuff like, Dark Horse does those He-Man books and, they're specially done editions for a particular publisher and print and binding and all that.
I'm getting like a memory blast here of these oldie style ads as well, where Chips Ahoy.
Yeah. Solve that maze in 2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like
if you want to cheat, just bite the cookie and you're halfway through.
But yeah, this is a really iconic cover image here, and I actually used to have a T-shirt with that exact image of Batman on it as well. It really kind of went on to transcend just that cover. What's the name of the artist again who did this?
David Mazzucchelli. I don't know if it's Mazzucchelli or Mazzucchelli. I'm between where you live. How you?
I just wanted you to say. I just wanted, yeah, I was actually, I wanted you to say his surname first, so then I could just copy it.
It's not as bad as Bill Sienkiewicz. I only learned how to pronounce his name in the last 2 years properly, and we've read stuff by him for more than 20 years.
And, you know, and I should probably maybe mention as well, folks, Johnny kind of alluded to it, you know, these are great comic book covers, but they're also perhaps something that means like a little bit to us as well. We're not saying like this is the best depiction of whatever ever, but it's just our own personal choice. And I know for me personally, Batman Year One, fantastic story, an excellent read. If any of you out there watching this now have not read it, I would.
It's very cheap to get too,
it.
and the trade's very cheap because it's only thin. It's only like 4 issues. The original was like 4 issues and then collected into a book.
Because of its popularity as well, it's been reissued and re-released a million times.
Yeah, which is good. You can even choose which version sometimes. You go on eBay and get new ones, secondhand ones.
Well, I'm going to have a wee look and see what the prices are like for this artist's edition that you have taken this.
They're I don't know what size they are. I think they're supposed to be quite large, like, you know, like your hardcover books that you normally show off artwork and that. Because I've never had one in person. You can look up on YouTube. The best thing is go on YouTube and go on Google or whatever. Really type in like Batman Year One Artist Edition and then put review and go to video results. Will give you YouTube, because the YouTube search itself sucks and will give you absolute garbage. But people who are like hardcore fans on there will have just a nice big desk and they'll flip through a book. Sometimes they're talking about it, sometimes they're not even saying it. They're just like literally showing you what's in the book so you can make an informed decision if you want to purchase something, which it's great. People do it because it's all on HD cameras. You can actually see as if you had the book in your own hand. It's like a little virtual tour of those books and special editions. I always look at the binding on stuff. If I'm going to buy some fancy edition or something, it better have good fucking binding on it, or it's not worth the paper it's printed on. There's been some good books over the years that are like, oh, we're doing this new collection of Astro Boy, and I bought it, and like the day I open it, the pages are falling out because they used like $2 shop glue, and there's no binding at all, nothing in it. So it's really useful to look on YouTube. People got videos showing off some of these special editions and stuff, and because there's no comic shop around here for me to go look at one, and I'm not going to see one in person anywhere.
Yeah. There's another bygone era as well where you could actually just go into a comic shop or a newsagent's and just flick through this stuff before you bought it. God knows I read many a story without actually purchasing said comic.
I read heaps of stuff for the shops in the 90s. Like I would read anything I could get away with. I bought a lot of stuff there, but I was buying Spider-Man around 94, 95, but I would thumb through anything Batman, X-Men. I would thumb through, get some idea what's going on. And you had like Age of Apocalypse and Nightfall, Night Quest, or Batman, all that stuff. And
so we got the Incredible Hulk 340 here. And I don't even own this comic like in its individual release. I do have like a collected volume of Incredible Hulk that just happened to have this as one of the the stories because it's like a famous issue or what have you. But I just
it's been homage many times as well.
Oh, so many times, which is actually part of the reason why I picked this. One of my more recent purchases, I may as well pull it out now. I've been picking up the Wolverine versus Predator series, but you can even see in that they've
I picked it up a few months
back
as well.
again. So instead of Hulk,
that was cool.
We see the Predator, and they even went and did what like they always do with comics now. Of course, the variant cover, so we got the opposite image of the Predator,
that was cool.
And then you can see Wolverine reflected in his clothes. So I thought that was a pretty cool homage they did on those covers. But this original one here, just with Wolverine like in his berserker mode, you can see the rage in his face and the reflection of the Hulk,
and the wrinkly grey Hulk.
The wrinkly grey Hulk. And
they did.
You pointed out a little difference here in the coloring between the digital
Yeah,
and
well, I
remaster?
always notice this stuff because it sticks out to me like a sore thumb. Everything basically pre 1990 was like the old style of coloring before they brought in stuff like Richard Starkings and Comic Crafts and went to like digital color. And this is like early like Apple Macs and shit like this, like 89, 99. They're slowly transitioning into digital coloring for comics. And in the comics of the day in the 90s in print, they looked fine. They were okay. But when they were post year 2000, when they were reprinting anything from the like basically 60s, 70s, 80s, anything up to before 1990 when digital coloring really started properly, or around that, I'm not saying exactly then, when they were reprinting older material, it was going back to the old print presses with their limited colors and their bloody color bleed that would go across and stuff. Sometimes the words would float over the page and be in the wrong spot and color bleed into the other pages. When they redid them into digital, they lost a lot of the shading and kind of three-dimensional depth, and everything becomes what I call flatland. It looks like everything's just completely flat on one plane, one surface, and everything's slightly too bright as well, like because like Hulk should be a bit dimmer and grey, and the claws are meant to be shiny, but they should be, if you look on the bottom right, the little nubbins that his claws are coming out have that shading, which is blue. I can tell that's just shading the same way you get like Venom would be black sometimes with blue shading, eventually became all blue. It's that same type of shading, showing that it's on metal and it's meant to be like grey and metallic. But on the digital one on the left, it's just all white. But yeah, you lose a lot of the finer details. The covers is not so bad. When you get to the interiors, when they get to these printed digital ones, I've got a Hulk trade and Avengers trade over there. Everything just looks really flat. And when a character's in the foreground, the background, it's like the background is like right in your face instead of being behind the character. It would be like if you went and saw a live play and everyone stood in exactly one line and with their backs pressed completely to the back of the set or the backdrop, and just nobody moved around or had any kind of like, three-dimensional space. Everything becomes a flat surface and kind of mucks up the comics.
That's like, you reckon that's kind of just whatever digital software they're using?
It was the limitations of the technology. Yeah. Like they've gotten better, but if you're getting stuff, anything that was basically created post year 2000, you don't have that issue because then computer coloring is more standardized. So if you were going to reprint something from 2001, 2002, where that's fine, they can redo that or change it or whatever. But it's just the limitations of going from the old like printing press stuff with its color bleed and its limited color palettes that would famously do things like not render people of certain races correctly, which I'm not saying just African American, but like people from South America or Indian would become like chalky white or so dark they're like a shadow, and they couldn't get the gradients and mixes. Like if you're doing hand painting, you can get little subtle colors and shades, but the old comics printing was fairly garbage. So the limitations of what they were able to print on those print presses and their limited color palettes, as that's why it translated poorly into the digital coloring, as well as with the early digital coloring was really just they were still learning what to do. But for the reprint stuff, they really fucked up a lot of stuff. Sometimes they made actual big mistakes and will completely color. You're reading Fantastic Four and the costumes are the wrong color and stuff like that. And
I think with this particular cover as well, it's often misremembered as being an actual Wolverine cover, even though it's an issue of the Incredible Hulk. And even though any story with Wolverine, or not, but like a lot of Wolverine stories have since taken this, and like we mentioned earlier with that Predator one, they've kind of done a homage to it. There was a really good Marvel Zombies version of this as well, where Wolverine's like decomposing and his claws are like coming apart. There's just there's been so many nice homages to this, but I still just love the this original one. I wouldn't mind getting a big print of this and having
it's awesome
somewhere significant.
And, like it becomes such an iconic cover. Like this cover, it's one of the most well-known, famous comic covers up there with stuff like the original Superman on Action Comics and stuff, which is, I'm not saying in value in that. Obviously, this actual book's valuable because Wolverine Hulk and that, but it's become a real pop art kind of piece. It's become like really, really popular. Like even back then, it was through the 90s. It carried on being, and for long term fans that seeing this book back when it's out, it's not just like, oh, these two cool characters are fighting. It's immediately a callback to the first appearance of Wolverine.
Yes, exactly, and it's probably one of the more generally accepted as being, you know, among the best or most iconic ones of the selection I picked for this show, because some of my other picks might be a little bit more possibly personal to me, just because I happen to be reading the stories at the time or picked up the issues at the time. This one I picked, it was definitely had a lot of mainstream appeal as well, for want of a better term. Like,
I mean, it's the kind of one that if you've never read a Wolverine or a Hulk, you could quite happily pick up a T-shirt or something of this and wear it, you know, without even having read any issues of it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Of course, though, now I can't help but be drawn to the differences in the color and the look and feel of the original versus the digital. But so be it. Our eyes must be open to this, you know. We must see the truth for what it is.
You can another thing you can notice. Look at the image on the left. There's a weird kind of halo or aurora borealis around Wolverine, but on the one on the right, that's there. But that's actually the color gradient going from blue to lighter at the bottom. There's not meant to be a halo around him like that.
The digital one almost looks like they defected. It's like because they carry the shine on the clothes down too much on it, and you miss some of the detail of Hulk's actual appearance. It's just
that's what all the interiors are like. That really mucks up the art. It all becomes super bright and flat, and you lose any like if I look at an actual shirt on me, it has texture and pattern. But if it was a digital thing, it will just be all one bland, flat color. Like if I got a big blue canvas, made it all exactly the same blue all over, with no difference to it, no contrast. That's what it looks like on the interiors. It really mucks up the art when they do the digital versions of these like 70s and 80s comics. But they're still very readable and affordable, which is the main thing, because it's not affordable to get the original editions or even the early reprints. A lot of those are too pricey to get now. So now we've got some Spider-Mans.
Spider-Man, a couple of amazing Spider-Mans here. Yeah, I have both of these issues lying around my house. The 30th anniversary Amazing Spider-Man, the giant-sized one with the gold foil web cover, that's actually hanging on the wall behind me.
Yeah, I used to see that at the comic shop. Like they would have stuff on the wall, not unlike behind you on the wall like that. They would have iconic covers like Green Goblin came back and the Spider armor, or it might have been Spider Armor 1 or 2. One was all grey and metallic. They did a special cover that was like a metal foil cover for the Spider Armor.
Yeah, but this first image from Spider-Man 238 of the Hobgoblin ripping the Spider-Man costume in half. Just love it. Absolutely love it. And on a slight tangent off topic, I would love if they released a stylized Hobgoblin figure that had the face blacked out with just the red eyes you could see, like on the cover of that.
Now, but who would he actually be? If it was original Hobgoblin, do you go with the imprint storyline of Ned Leeds, who never was intended to be the Hobgoblin, or do you go with the true Hobgoblin, who was Robert Kingsley, I think was his name, like the grey-haired dude? Yes. They did a story years later based on the unpublished script, because things get shuffled around and writers changes and editorial and all that. The original Hobgoblin was meant to be this like criminal organized guy called Robert Kingsley, but that comic didn't get printed go ahead, and they made it Ned Leeds. But Ned Leeds was just meant to be a red herring. He was meant to be just someone the Hobgoblin had framed to make him look like it was someone else and throw them off the scent.
And of course, in between that, you've got the craziness of Jason Macendale also being
with his terrible bloody 90s haircut. I always remember that bold Beatles haircut he had.
And getting loads of like cybernetic enhancements on top of his Hobgoblin armor.
Yeah, they came back in the later run in the 90s. He had like a grey costume.
Yes, that's right.
Like something out of Gargoyles.
the story you mentioned earlier, where they went back and to that unreleased or the
It's like a
unaccounted for
one-shot
strip.
thing. Like there was,
Yeah, I actually have it. I'm looking on my
yeah.
shelf.
I used to have it.
It's called Hobgoblin Lives. That's what it's
That's it.
called.
That's it.
And
I used to have it. I
yeah,
gave away my Spider-Man comics years ago. When I lived in New Zealand, I had like, I don't know, probably close to 1,000 different single comics, like, you know, normal monthly editions. But it was too expensive to ship stuff, so I just left them. I actually took them back to the comic shop where I bought a lot of them. I just gave them to them. And they said, "Do you want anything?" I said, "No, I'm only here a week from Australia. I'm not paying to ship this over there. It's too expensive. The weight of all these boxes, long boxes, is too much. So it wasn't worth it. So I just gave them away."
I was always fascinated by both the Hobgoblin and the Green Goblin and
Yeah,
Spider-Man. Like by the time I became a proper Spider-Man fan, the Hobgoblin was already among his regular villains.
yeah.
So
And there was on the
there
animated
was a
series too with Mark Hamill.
that that's right. And I there was a little bit of childhood confusion with me around the Hobgoblin and the Green Goblin, because in the cartoon series, the Hobgoblin is introduced first, before the Green Goblin, whereas
Yeah,
in the
that's real
comics,
confusing on the show.
yeah, yeah, in the comics, obviously the Green Goblin came first, long before the Hobgoblin,
Well, in
and
the
then
90s, we had Macadowell's Hobgoblin 2, although depending on if you go with the actual real continuity, it would have been at least the third one if you count Kingsley. Um, and then the red herring of Ned Leeds, who at least had the costume on at some point for the, you know, to be the fake Hobgoblin. Then we had Osborn being original Green Goblin, his son being Green Goblin 2, who came back, or both of them, or he was in the 90s, but Osborn was dead for decades, but they brought him back later on. Then you had a third Green Goblin was got his own series. It was 25 issues because I had it. I bought it, and it
yes,
had a hologram thing on the cover. He was, I think it was Phil. He was meant to be the nephew of Ben Urich, the reporter, or something like that. I can't remember
that's right.
exactly who he was, but he was a good guy. He discovered an old stash of a Hobgoblin lair or hideout, like kind of Batman style. It was like a whole bunch of equipment that was stashed at somewhere in the city and been forgotten about. And he took the stuff and just became like a heroic, good version of him. But he was only around a couple of years, and people forget he pretty much even exists now.
I would actually like to read that series, the 25 issues,
It was
because
quite.
I
I bought it
only
back then. I read the whole thing.
I was aware of that third Green Goblin, but my awareness of him came from, because he appears. I think the first time he appears is during the Spider-Man clone saga. He appears in
Yeah,
a
yeah. It was during that. It
one
was
issue of
like
Spider-Man.
mid to late 90s.
So I knew him from that story, but I never got a chance to collect or to read his own series. So I actually wouldn't
It was a
mind
decent run. It went
having a read
25
of that.
issues, which was pretty good for then.
The goblins though are just cool in general. Like, I love the idea of them. Like, you're dressed as a goblin, you're throwing pumpkin bombs, you're on your flying glider. I just love it, and it's ridiculously cartoonish and camp to the point where I
Yeah.
don't think it ever really translates well to live action. The goblins, like, they just, like the Green Goblin has been tried obviously now a couple of times. I just don't think they can really pull it off the way you can do it in the
Oh,
books,
it works
in a
much
comic
better in the
book.
comics and animations. Yeah.
But yeah, my second cover here, for issue 375, the 30th anniversary. I suppose when you're looking at it like this, we're looking at a photo here, but if you're looking at this cover in hand, it's an actual
It's
foil,
got the foil.
shiny cover.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. Like, it's really beautiful, and when the light hits it, it's so shiny and cool, which as a kid, you know, is like a really really big deal. Like, to have these shiny foil versions of things, whether it's
They did
on
so many of
comic
those
books
covers in the
or
90s.
oh, they do. Like, I've like 5 separate foil 90s Spider-Man
Mm.
covers just hanging behind me on the door here, and
I
oh,
had
they were
one.
trying anything.
Yeah. They did so
Get
many
those
different ones.
sales
They
in.
did sometimes they did a die cut cover where they just cut pieces out and it was basically hollow, and then another image behind it. So the first page would come through, but it was like a post image coming through the cover, and that was a cool look. They did that on one of the Sensational Spider-Man annuals or something, and it was a big red spider, and in between the legs was empty space where they'd cut it out, and there was then the first page underneath. They had the foil ones. There were some that had little hologram circle discs, kind of like a POG sized disc glued to the cover. They did that on some ones. And then there was gatefold covers that folded out. I had one. I got a Punisher one that's a 4 folds out into like what would be 4 pages. Punisher over the edge when he went crazy and supposedly killed Nick Fury. That's got foil out the wazoo. I think I still have that somewhere, and it's like not the best art, but the cover is like, man, it's so shiny. It would like blind yourself looking at how shiny and foily that one is.
Of course, they're lying to us here on the cover. It's Spidey versus Venom, the final confrontation.
The final confrontation. It's not even the final Venom. It's like, do you know what's funny? Back then there was only Eddie Brock and Venom after Parker had the black suit. Now there's been like half a dozen different characters that have been Venom. Although I guess the first 90s one was when it temporarily went on one of his girlfriends and became like a lady Venom for a bit.
That's right.
And then you had all the then it had the seeds. It had its egg seeds that like the Life Foundation and the Vault. It had all those spawns of Venom, but they were around and kind of disappeared for a while. And then we had like so many other characters have been Venom since then. Matt Gargan, his actual biological son in the comics now is Venom.
Yeah, and we had the wild ride of the planet of the symbiotes and all that crazy stuff as well.
And years later, Flash Thompson became Agent Venom, and I quite enjoyed that. That run was fun.
It's a great piece of artwork, even looking beyond the cool foil web.
Yeah, the Mark Bagley.
The actual struggle and Venom grabbing Spidey's arm there, trying to stop him getting his dig in.
I would call like Bagley the definitive Spider-Man artist of the 90s. Some people will go, excuse me, it's Todd McFarlane. Like, no, Todd McFarlane was a fucking cover artist. He wasn't like he did interiors, but when McFarlane was doing some books, he pretty much did Spider-Man in the style that like Eric Larson was doing, and Eric Larson's pretty much doing what Mark Bagley was doing. So in the same way that like Neil Adams was doing Batman in the 70s, then they did like the house style. Jim Aparo, probably the biggest Batman artist of the 80s, like as in how many actual issues he drew, it was a lot. But he was doing the house style. So if you didn't know one from another, you could pick up a Jim Aparo Batman and think it was a Neil Adams, but it's done in the style, the house style of that. So the Mark Bagley, he was doing the art, and then the other artists doing kind of like the house style. But this is one of his ones here. But he did so many Spider-Man 90s comics, not just covers, but interiors. And to me, he was like the definitive Spider-Man 90s artist in the way that like, like Ditko was the original. And then we had, of course, Romita Sr. and later on Romita Jr., which he would, to me, although Romita Jr. was doing stuff in the 90s, a lot of stuff, his Spider-Man era was really post year 2000 for like for the volume. He did, several years on the books and that.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you there, 100%.
Like when you look at the toys, look at those Toy Biz toys, which were based on the animated show. The animated show used Romita Senior models for the look of the like Spider-Man's got big wide Captain America shoulders in that show. He's pretty beefy. But you look at the toys, they all look like the Mark Bagley Spider-Man. They're all skinny and weedy and they've got all these bodybuilder muscles poking out like this cover here. Or Venom's got bodybuilder muscles, Spider-Man's got like a gymnast muscles, every bit's like cut and defined.
Yeah, Spidey's got like an 8-pack in that type of scenario.
Yeah.
But he was slim but muscular, whereas Venom is like very buff wrestler like.
Yeah, well, Eddie Brock was like a hobbyist bodybuilder who would be not as big as Arnold, but he was meant to be wide and stocky and short. So he was a big guy before he put the suit on.
That's why I use the Diamond Select Venom as my Venom, because I want him extra big, extra beefy.
Yeah.
It's like it's Venom on steroids, which is a scary thought,
Yeah, it's funny. Venom changed looks a few times. He had like there is in his classic mid-90s look where it's the that became his ongoing look and colors, where he's colored blue with shading of black. Whereas in his first appearances where he was drawn by McFarlane, he was colored all black and had little highlights of shading of blue. And people forget that he's actually colored black and not blue because he appears blue so much in print.
And in the 90s animation, they give him a kind of half and half blue and red.
Yeah.
appearance, like blue shading and red shading against the
They
black,
look pretty
which makes
nice.
them look very, yeah, it did look pretty nice, very unique.
They did the toon version of that figure a few months back too.
Yeah, two great covers here, I have to say.
Yeah, like I read lots of Spider-Man in the 90s, more than anything else, so I'm familiar with all these stories, and I've got a lot of reprints. Marvel Tales, Marvel Team Up used to pick up out of the dollar bin sometimes. At one point I had at least 50 different issues of Marvel Team Up, as in the Spider-Man Marvel Team Up, not the other titles. And that's how I got to read some of my earliest stories, where it's like with Captain America or X-Men, and who would have been like new X-Men at that point, you know, like Colossus and Nightcrawler and Wolverine and Storm and all that.
Back when the concept of team-ups and crossovers was still unique and fresh.
The original Marvel Team-Ups are awesome book. The first 2 volumes are awesome. I used to have I think the first volume ran to about 150 issues. I had issue 150 where he teams up with the X-Men and Juggernauts on like the cover, and it's a really cool like double-sized issue.
Yeah, some real blinders in there in that series for sure.
Yeah, I love seeing them with like where you had run-ins with like Thing, Hulk, Johnny Storm, Fantastic Four, any of those. It's like they're like just fighting families whenever he runs into those characters.
Yeah, even for the covers alone, like you could probably even do a whole separate video on Marvel team-up covers, because they've got
easily. That you might just have picked a topic you might have to do next month now. Marvel team-up covers or covers, but then like maybe what cool covers, but what had the good story to go with the cover. Okay, I've picked one of the weird, bizarre, like 50s going into the 60s Batman covers back when it was the science fiction era and it was all bloody censorship and they couldn't show violence or anything interesting in comic books, and basically the decade where comic books were superhero comic books were fairly awful, as far as all the characters didn't make a lot of sense and we're having wacky adventures. So to please, you know, censorship of an art form in America, which is, you know, massive topic and very well known. But this one here, we've got the great Batman swindle. Batman and Robin are outside the building looking through this window, and there's this room, looks like it's seen out of Mad Men or something, but they're all dressed like Batman, and one of them's in a suit, and it looks all kind of very corporate or cultish. And it's like and the blurb's going, Judson, you've proved yourself worthy in becoming a Batman. For $20,000, you can purchase a full-size Batmobile to be made from this model. Which, in my parody version over here, I just made it McFarlane Toys Comics, because it's like it's what it feels like. It feels like this is a McFarlane Toys meeting.
So are you in fact the originator of this meme here? Because that's genius.
No, this is just one of my silly these covers, people have done so many memes and gags for more than 20 years. But a few months back, I just this one on the right, I made a whole bunch one day. Basically, I made them for Bill on Weird Fantastic Toys. I did them for me just because I have a laugh and it makes me laugh. But I sent a whole bunch to him, and I said, if you want to use it in my show, that you're welcome to. Made a whole bunch of ones like silly, bloody like Barbie covers and all kinds of stuff, and just like change the text. And I changed, like, I've got ones with Batman where I change it from detective to defective comics and had something just like stupid going on the cover. But yeah, I've got my blurb. I've got the same scene, but he's going, so it's agreed, we'll only ever make Batman figures and nothing else. It's like, I'm like, yep, that's the internal meeting going on at the filing for figures.
To be honest though, it's a very cool cover. Like, I know.
Yeah, I'd put it on the wall as a poster. It's just a cool cover. They did so many bizarre covers in this era, and like you can tell the artists had fun trying to kind of out bizarre each other. They're called gimmick covers for a reason. It's just to grab your attention. Sometimes, like this one, the story actually matches the cover. Some of the covers are so bizarre and the story has nothing to do with the covers in a lot of these issues. It's just a gimmick cover to grab your attention on the spinner rack, so you look at this comic over whatever else comic is on the shelf or spinner rack next to it. But yeah, that led to a whole era, a whole decade where there's just so many crazy Batman and Superman covers and doing bizarre things, like Batman's a bloody monkey and he's turned into a gorilla and then he's fighting an alien and all the nonsense stuff. And I picked for one of my other favorite ones because I've got like a few different hardcover books that have like different Batman covers and such, and goes through the eras. And this one is one that you see it and you laugh at it because it's just so over the top and crazy. But and at first I'm like, it's not even particularly good art. I wouldn't say it's composed well or anything, but it's become one of the most popular weird Batman covers. Like if just about if you look up list of top 10, top 15 bizarre Batman covers, which tend to be from the 50s, this one's on pretty much every list out there. And he's got the rainbow Batman. So he's wearing this pink costume, and the background's a whole bunch of weird colored ones. Robin's going, but Batman, last night you wore the green costume. Tonight you're wearing the red. Why? And Batman's going, I must, Robin. I must wear a different colored Batman costume each night. And in the actual story, he never wears the pink costume. He wears the other ones, but not that. So it's very misleading. But then Mattel a few years ago, a couple years before McFarlane got the contract, they actually made each one of those colors into a big set of Batman figures in a box set.
Yes.
And I do have the pink one. I don't have all the other ones, but I managed to get the pink one cheap on eBay because it was just such a novelty getting this like crazy pink Batman. He looks like so bizarre.
I can see McFarlane doing another take on that as well, just to get that mold out.
They've done the Funko and all sorts now. I'm surprised they haven't done more of these crazy ones because there's the zebra Batman, there's like a reverse polarity Batman, and ones that kind of look like bloody not Deadshot, the other guy, Bullseye. Like there's all sorts of ones that come up with just nonsense one-off costumes for these covers. They could make into hundreds of different figures. I think they've done a couple of them, but there's so many, and there's so many crazy designs they can make into toys. But yeah, I do love this cover.
You've read though the actual story. What is the?
I have read this story.
What's the actual premise?
The story is pretty forgettable. It's not even really worth reading, to be honest. It's like the cover's the best thing about it. It's just like some kind of weird gimmickers in disguise or something. I forget the details, but I have read it years ago, and it's a really forgettable story. Some of the other gimmick covers have like much more cool, fun story, like the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, which is that weird purple and red costume. The guy is like a guy on an alien planet who's watching Batman through a telescope, and Batman goes to his planet during his crazy interstellar days, and he meets him, and he's like, Batman, you're my hero. I was inspired by you. I became the Batman of this planet, basically, called Zur-En-Arrh. But why the hell did he make his costume purple and crazy colors? He never gets to that part of the story. He's like, I was inspired by you, Batman, but like, I know, I guess everything's more colorful. It's meant to be kind of like that retro futurism and sort of crazy rockets and spirals and everything's colorful. So I guess that's why he had the weird colorful costume in the Zur-En-Arrh. But yeah, I love seeing all these crazy variants and bizarre costumes and stuff. And it's not the best cover. It's just like the logo placement's pretty shit, and that TV or whatever it is with the bat signal just looks terrible sitting there. But it's just fun. It's just like so fun and over the top.
I just love the wackiness of it. I think it's just crazy, but in a good way.
Like I've seen it many, many years ago and gone, oh, these are bizarre. And then it's kind of ironic, and it's like a lot of jokes, and wasn't Batman terrible back then? And then I've come back around to I genuinely love and appreciate all these bizarre covers and weird stories.
It's a bit of extra
proper
flavor,
serious story. Serious stories, and
Yeah.
these ones are Neil Adams 70s Batman ones, and these covers are just awesome. Like some of the best ever for Batman stuff. You got the Demon of Gothos Mansion, which we've got a vampire dude chasing the lady down a hill in this kind of mansion in the background, and it's not obvious there, but it's based on Christopher Lee. If you blow that image up, it's pretty much Christopher Lee's face on that guy for like the Hammer horror style vampire. And that cover is just another callback to the very first year of Batman and Detective Comics, where they had the first year was had a lot of crime and horror stories, like, you know, the pulp era and all that. And there was several issues that dealt with like Dr. Deaths, and there was like vampires and werewolves and weird gothic horror stuff. Like that was in the first year of Batman quite a lot. So that covers like an homage back to some of that stuff. And he did a couple like that. He did another one. I can't think that's actually. Oh, yeah, it's the Mad Monk. He did another one with the Mad Monk cover that one is an actual, I might be confusing it with the Matt Wagner one, but the Mad Monk one is called back to the original actual cover as well. But this one also calls back to one of the early covers in the design. But it's such a beautiful image. You got like this kind of silhouette of Batman, which looks a lot like that first one we started off with, the David Mazzucchelli, where he's kind of hunching the shoulders forward and just kind of standing there. We've got all the foggy, misty stuff in the foreground, and then all the lower stuff with the damsel in distress being chased away. So there's no, other than the blurb, the demon of Gotham's Mansion, that doesn't even need to be there. Just it's Batman. It's already telling us a story with this simple image there, and there's no one's throwing a punch. There's no superhero-y stuff. It's just a very gothic horror sort of image.
Yeah, it could even work as like a movie poster for back in the day.
Yeah, just get rid of that Robin that someone's obviously slapped on there. That's doesn't need to be there either.
Yeah, I wonder what that was. Is it like an extra Robin story?
Probably another backup story, I would think, because you can tell that's the cover, and then they've gone, well, we've slapped this text on, we've slapped this Robin like it's like some dollar sticker that's gone on top of it. It's like, let's ruin your cover.
Love this middle one here as well with the Joker. Look
at that one's very.
Joker's
that's been made into a poster a lot.
Yes, yes.
I have it on a T-shirt, on a big, full, massive image that covers the entire shirt, and I very occasionally wear it because I want it to last and not get worn out in the bloody Perth sun and all that. So I tend to only wear it in winter.
Some quite the violent depiction here on the Ra's al Ghul cover, or what we're seeing, an impalement. Can you show that to children in the comics?
Oh no, it's not clear from there. It's in the sand in the background.
It's in the sand,
I don't know if you see the proper original illustration in black and white, the perspective's kind of a bit mucked up on the cover there because the sand. I don't know how many times they've reprinted and recolored things, but the sand is kind of a shonky color there at sunset, and it does make it look like the sword's going into his chest instead of behind him. It's meant to be like they've had their big jousting sword fight, and it's like he's beaten him, and then he's stuck it in the ground like afterwards, sort of. But that was an awesome cover, and I know it's iconic for a number of reasons, because you've got Batman with the bare chest, which you basically never in this area you basically never saw that, and he's got a hairy chest, not just any old chest, and he's not in Gotham. He's in a very Arabian Nights sort of looking background. You can see there's camels, sunset, sand, which the sand's a weird color there, but when you see the other stories and comics, it's obviously like big desert type sand. And it's during that era in the 70s where Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil were writing stories, and they made Batman very much influenced by like James Bond, having these big globe-trotting adventures like the Sean Connery and the Roger Moore era of James Bond, where they're in exotic locations and there's fancy women and they're having battles, and he has this amazing swashbuckling sword fight with Ra's al Ghul, who turns out to be like his equivalent or better in sword fighting.
It's awesome. It's really awesome. It's such a class looking cover, though. I love the whole, the caravan of camels and the light going off in the background into the desert.
If you like James Bond, or if you like what I was rewatching recently, like the Adventures of Sinbad and all that kind of swashbuckling stories, and Indiana Jones, is very much like that sort of style.
Yeah, really showing Batman in a vulnerable position here as well, which is a little bit different to your average cover. Not just him being cool or doing something cool. He's actually in a bit of trouble here.
Yeah.
Some jeopardy.
Yeah, they've reprinted these stories a lot, but unfortunately the reprints are all out of print again. So I've been waiting again, trying to get affordable modern edition so I can actually have those Neil Adams 70s stories, because I don't own any of them. I've read them, but I don't own any of them.
Yeah, it's starting to, well, depending on what you're looking for, like some of these things, it will be difficult to acquire a good physical copy of without.
They've done a few editions, but each time I've gone to get them, I've just missed them by a year or two, and then the price is shot up on eBay, and then they're out of print and not available.
And depending on what you're willing to put up with, like a lot of the Batman from that era, I read it in the form of what would be DC's equivalent to the Marvel Essential series, where essentially you
Yeah.
just get a big book of black and white reprints. It's cheap and cheerful, like, but you know, if you actually want to actually have a physical, colorful copy in your hand, it's going to be pretty hard to find ones that are still in print and easily available.
Yeah, they had. There's at least a couple of different editions of those stories. Like I don't know about the sort of 70s, 80s reprints, but post year 2000, I'm familiar with those editions. There was some good ones that actually collected basically the full run of the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams stories, which were not entirely chronological. There was gaps where they were on it for a bit, then they weren't, and filler artists and whatever. But collected their stories they worked on together into like certain editions, and then there's been in recent years they've done artist specific collections for Batman, so you can get like like a Jeff Loeb collection or whoever, or it's by writer or artist, or it'll be like a Neil Adams themed collection. There's been quite a few like that, but which were quite affordable trades. So like some of them were like 300-400 pages, soft covers, decent print, but a lot of them are out of print now too, so it's harder to get them again.
Yeah, it's just, I'm not going to go into the complaints of the modern collecting scene when it comes to
it'll come back. I reckon they'll eventually reprint them again, because there's not been a decade yet where they haven't reprinted those stories.
Yeah, and at least we are lucky enough that it is a property like Batman that will remain popular enough to actually justify.
I hope they do a new updated omnibus, because if they do, I'll grab that. Even if it's pricey, I'll definitely get it.
Yeah, but if you like more obscure heroes or characters or stories, you could be shit out of luck as far as some of these reprints go. But yeah, these are great covers here. Oh, some Predator. We've looked at a few of these, not so recently enough, I would say, when we did our big Aliens and Predator.
It was about middle last year.
We also did a special episode dedicated totally to the comics and the crossover covers and all that type of stuff. Now,
I reread a heap of these when we were doing those shows too. I read for about 4 weeks. I just read Aliens and Predator comics.
Yeah, and they're so good. They're so good. Like Dark Horse Comics, they really did a bang-up job with the Aliens and Predator.
And they've done
comics.
Since the Marvel's got the license now from the Fox hullabaloo nonsense, or Marvel, Fox, Disney. They've done some of those Marvel epic ones that are like 300-400 pages for about $40, soft cover, all color but soft covers, and they've done Aliens 2 volumes of that, and I think they're doing a Predator volume. I'm not sure if it's been out or not.
Yeah, well, look, long may it last. I hope they keep putting them out as long as there's people willing to pick them up. And this is one of those things, like a lot of the stuff we've spoken about. I probably could have went and picked any number of Aliens or Predator covers. I focus particularly on this original issue of Predator because I do think it's such an iconic cover of the Predator standing on the ledge and pray to the heavens, essentially. And I love I love that staff he has with like the human skull and spine like wrapped around it and going the whole way down. NECA did like an excellent figure of this version of the Predator, I have to say, colored in that comic book layout. So really, really cool. But I can see even here you've taken some other like iconic Predator covers because there's so many of them. It really is hard to kind of nail down a select few. But
I love that, like the heat. Job. Like, I know it just says Predator, but whenever I see that sort of image, it makes me think like Predator 2 and the heat in LA and that haze.
Well, as we discussed at the time, you're really likely to think about Predator 2 when you read that comic, since Predator 2 stole so much of its ideas.
Yeah. Well, remember that a lot of the print ads used a lot of stuff based off that comic, like the pose of that comic cover. Even like the ones for the video game and that were like borrowing stuff from that.
Yeah, it was everywhere at the time, and it's a beautiful, beautiful cover. I just love the whole contrast and the red and yellow background against the blue of the Predator. It just looks really, really nice. Another one that I would absolutely love to have a big, giant sized print of that I could hang on the wall if I had space to hang it. I'd absolutely
big giant sized Predator thing.
Yes. Speaking of giant sized Predators, I see your giant sized City Hunter from your back garden down here as well. Excellent.
Yeah, he's always up in the corner looking down on me from up in the corner here. Could attack at any time.
And you're in the line of images here, though, the second image of the Predator as well, peering through the bushes is very cool. Very cool cover.
Hopefully he's peering through. Hopefully he's not doing that Homer Simpson thing and going backwards into the bush.
Yeah, disappearing through.
Disappearing.
Hopefully he's not being a peeping Tom or doing anything weird, you know. So Predator would be the ultimate peeping Tom with his camouflage.
Yeah.
If he wanted to indulge in such activities. But
yeah, I'd happily buy a big poster book of just Dark Horse 90s Alien Predator covers.
Oh, you know, funny you should mention that, Johnny. There was such a thing. Once again, I'm not sure if it still is in print. Probably not, because it was a Dark Horse release. But they did release a big, thick book of Alien and Predator.
Oh, nice! I've never seen that one.
So, yeah, it came out, I want to say around 07, 08. Maybe Disney will do their own version of it. Who knows?
That'd be nice.
I will miss the Dark Horse run of Alien and Predator. I've read a little bit of Disney's contributions so far. I should probably stop saying Disney. It's Marvel, but you know what I mean. It's the same.
Disney Marvel.
But they're okay. Like, you know, they've some nice covers and that, but I don't know. Dark Horse just got that vibe right, I think.
Yeah, I read some of them too, and I thought they're perfectly serviceable, but nothing really stands out.
Yes. And then again, it's one of those things where we are getting on a bit, and we've read a lot of stories now. Like, how much more mileage can you really get out of these properties? I wonder.
I get something that comes to mind. Like, I don't know the background of who's working on the Marvel Alien Predator books, as in the news stories, not the reprints. But I don't know whether they're people that normally do superhero stuff or horror or science fiction. But definitely, Dark Horse was known for doing science fiction and horror type stuff. Yes. So that's part of why their stories are good.
I showed that Predator versus Wolverine earlier. I still haven't even read those. I really need to read those this weekend.
I read it before I got it. I ordered the softcover trade on Amazon because it was like $20. It was cheap, but I read it online first, and I thought, oh, this is okay. The story is average. The art's nice, but I'm like, well, it's cheap. I'll get it.
Yeah, and that's kind of like my gut was telling me it was probably going to be a bit like that anyway. It was. I guess
the thing that bugged me in the story is that, like, it's the timeline just jumps all over the place. I'd rather they just did. I mean, each of the timeline jumps could have been its own 4-issue story.
Yeah. Which is something they like to do in a lot of modern Wolverine stories anyway, I think, is hop around.
Well, they played up because you know how in the modern Marvel how Wolverine's like been alive since at least late 1800s, and the Predator's been to Earth multiple times. That's what they play up in the story. And I won't give it all away, but in the story, basically, you know, the Predators come, they kill things, trophy hunting. One runs into Wolverine, and like Wolverine's still alive, and the Predator goes away wounded and keeps coming back, trying to find him and trying to kill him, getting more pissed off each time, and he can't kill him.
Yeah, I know. I can dig the basic premise. Definitely, we'll just see how it's executed. Will it live up to my imagination? Probably not. But
the covers are awesome. They did great covers. There's some good action and stuff in there, but I wish, like, I've got no complaints. I'm glad they did it. It's cool, but I wish they'd done it as like a 10-issue series instead of 4 issues. It just feels a bit compressed, you know. It's like we're seeing the Cliff Notes sort of thing. Now, tell us about these ones here. We've got Astonishing Spider-Man. These is like a UK reprint series.
Yeah, so Astonishing Spider-Man was available. It was printed in the UK. It was also available here in Ireland. And essentially, what it was a collection. What they would do is they would take the ongoing American stories from the various Spider-Man titles, and they would actually compile them into one issue essentially, so you could read the story in chronological order without having to buy all the separate titles individually.
Yeah, there's like
So they would
4
take
titles a month then.
yeah, and like we were even talking about it before we went on air today. You know, you had things like you had Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man, Spider-Man Spider-Man. You know, there was so many different Spider-Man titles, and especially during the Clone Saga, which could be a pretty difficult storyline to follow week to week as it was.
Yeah, I read it all and bought it all back then, so I know.
Yeah, I imagine that was tough. I was really grateful that the Marvel
Things
UK...
would get released out of order because you had 4 monthly books. I mean, at one point there was 1 book, then there was 2, then there was 3. At this point, Spider-Man had 4 monthly books, Batman had 4 monthly books, X-Men had 4 monthly books, and they were the 3 biggest. Sorry, Superman as well. Superman also had 4 monthly books. So these were the biggest icons who were selling the most issues in the 90s in merchandise. That's why they kept pumping out more and more books. And the poor creative teams, so each book had its own creative team, and they might have an editorial meeting once a month or every other month, and half the time they don't even know what's going on. They've got to write the bloody stories, they've got to crank them out, and then sometimes it might be part 1 of 3. It will go from amazing into Peter Parker into sensational, part 2, part 3, to make you have to get all the books to get the story. But then part 3 of the story might come out at the start of the month before we got part 1 at the end of the month. So you're reading stuff out of order all the time. And the poor guy, I feel bad for the guys even writing this and how bloody chaotic it must have been, because it was one of the worst times to be working on Spider-Man at Marvel. Like the poor, I think some of the people probably got burnout working on some of this stuff.
That's why I'm so happy I was able to read the Clone Saga through these comics instead of having to do what you and others were doing.
And the stuff that
it was just great.
came before it goes all the way back several years. Like the setup for it, when the clone first turns up, is 2 or 3 years before they even get into the Clone Saga story. I mean, in our time, not in comic time.
The real beautiful thing about these Astonishing Spider-Man collections were, so first of all, they're released monthly, and not only do you get, you know, a few issues of the modern, or at the time the contemporary stories. In the back, they would also print a classic Spider-Man story from the 60s or the 70s. So while I was reading what was currently happening in the 90s, each month I was also able to read like a classic Spidey story from the 60s or 70s. So that was really cool. I was kind of getting the lore from both ends essentially. Like I was experiencing the modern stuff while also being able to easily go back and read some of the classic stories. And if there was like multiple parts, say, to a classic story, like they would have done like the death of Gwen Stacy over several issues, they just space this, they'd pad it out. But another thing I love, and the first cover we see here, the largest ones, it's one of my favorites, of Kane ripping off the Spider-Man mask and going to attack the Hobgoblin. But all the covers, one thing I love is all of these covers are completely unique to the UK and Irish market.
Yeah, I looked at the whole run of them earlier. They're all just like Doctor Who or Transformers UK. They all got their own original covers.
And there's a real vibe to Marvel UK covers. Like these Spider-Man covers look like they could be like from the same artists who do like the Transformers UK and those type of covers. There's just something different about them, and they almost seem to be from a decade prior, even though this was the 90s. These covers feel like they could have been done in the 80s. Just have that look about them. And if you folks at home are wondering what the free gifts were that came,
I want that gift.
Yeah, it was those kind of Fleer Ultra Marvel collectors cards and Marvel superhero cards. I was big into collecting them back in the day. So
I had some of
yeah,
those about 93 or 92, and I collected some. I even bought a whole set of X-Men stuff one time. And I was sitting around there one day with my friend looking at all these cards, and I'm going, you know, these are like cool artwork and cool characters. And with, you know, when you're a kid, you'd get like bloody Batman movie trading cards, Ninja Turtles. That was stuff you'd get after school at the shop. Whereas now I was going to the actual comic shop in the city, picking up cards from there, and they had everything. So that was used to what I was buying, and we'd browse and look at the shop for hours and not really buy stuff other than cards. And one day I was sitting there going, "Oh man, this is cool." And I think probably Spider-Man's on TV by now, and I was watching that. I was going, "These are all like pictures of comic book characters," and I'm like, "Why don't I just buy the comic book? Why am I buying pictures like a photo of a comic book? You know, these cards. Why don't I buy the actual comic book?" So I started buying the actual comic books, and I stopped buying cards because I like the characters. And I used to have a set of like 93 or 94 X-Men, and it had like Wolverine versus Thing, Wolverine versus Hulk, and Wolverine versus Omega. I'm like, I want to see these stories, not just look at pictures of the card of it.
And also make mention of the fact as well, you can see at the top of each of these covers the words Collector's Edition. And that was how they were published month to month. So it felt as well like you were getting real value for money, because you're essentially getting like 5 issues of a comic in one volume. And like, look at the prices here. It's like $1.99, $2.99,
Yeah, £2 for a
2.25.
big, massive magazine thickness thing of reprint.
Yeah, really good
I,
value.
I didn't know they were still doing, like, it doesn't have the, obviously there's a Marvel UK published books, but they don't have the Marvel UK logo. That was interesting. It's got the American
Yes.
logo. And I didn't know Marvel UK was still doing stuff like this at this late in the game. I'm only more familiar with their 80s stuff.
And this ran for a long time. And like you can even see here, you might notice that on the final cover here with She-Venom, they've actually added in the words "the new" at the top, so it says "the new Astonishing Spider-Man,"
Yeah.
and that's
Well,
to
yeah, because
it's because of
because
Ben
that's Ben
Riley. It's
Riley.
Ben Riley. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
that's his
yeah, no,
costume.
great series. It really was. Like I still have so many of these issues upstairs in my loft. Like I've kept them since I was a kid, and
I
I'm
never.
still able to go back and read them.
Oh, cool. They did. Haven't mentioned it before, but in the 90s they did the Spider-Man logo redesign, which is on the top of all these, and eventually went back to the older style ones. But it's one of the few superhero logo redesigns I actually like, and it's very much of its time. There's a lot of ones that
Yes.
have been garbage over the years, and I read a column years ago on comic book resources from Eric Larson, who worked on Spider-Man briefly, but he created Savage Dragon, worked at Image Comics, and yada yada. Um, he used to write really good just opinion columns just about comic stuff. He'd be like, well, Fantastic Four works best in the 60s. That's what I think about this, you know, giving his 2 cents. And one of them was like talking about logos, like as in superhero logos, your fonts and there's people he would like argue against as in like businessy people as opposed to comicsy people were like, oh, we should redesign this and redo this. And that was a very big thing in the 90s too. It's like, oh, graphic design, we've got to redesign and repackage everything. Coca-Cola, new Coke. I mean, like, no, but not everything needs that to be changed every 5 minutes. And one of the best examples is the original Superman logo, not the Action Comics logo, which is its own beautiful logo, but Superman and that font and the big letters like coming at you with the shadow effect. That's remained for decades and decades, and one of the most iconic superhero graphic design things. And it's still brilliant as now as it was back then. And his argument was like, well, that's worked for so many decades. Like, why do you want to change it for the sake of changing it? It's ridiculous. It's just and it's worked as a brand and a logo thing for decades and decades, and you want to change and mess it up so people don't know what it is and it looks garbage. I'm like, no, that's idiocy. And I agree. It's like if you've got something that works, you don't mess with it, especially when it's been around. Something like the Superman one been around, like, you know, at that point 70 years or more by now.
I'll actually mention as well that for anybody who's interested, while this Astonishing Spider-Man series was running, there was also an equivalent X-Men and Wolverine collector's edition books that were also released on a monthly basis, which I
Cool.
used to pick up as well. So yeah, Marvel UK, even though they weren't printing much of their own original stuff at the time, they were doing these really, really good collected editions of the American materials. So yeah, I was delighted to have a chance to get reading that stuff as a youngster. Really, really delighted with it. And like I said, with the covers as well, like you're not going to see these covers in the American market. They were exclusive to the UK and Irish scene, and
Pretty cool.
that first one there, especially of Kane ripping off the mask, I just love it, man. It just looks beautiful.
I used to see as a kid, back was in like primary school and then later in high school, that Selwyn Street shops where I lived in Christchurch. There was a record shop, and occasionally we had like beat up old comics sitting on a shelf, and they were just really dog shit. The corners ripped out and falling apart, and the guy always charged a ridiculous amount for them. And if you touched them, he'd be like, "Don't touch those!" And like, he seemed to think they were like worth money or something, but they were. You wouldn't even give them away. That you'd throw them in trash, half these books. And occasionally I would go in and try and buy one because it was right next to my house where I lived. At my mum's place was next to some shops, so I could just walk over there. But he would almost like come in and like chase you out of the store because he wanted people to buy records, and he didn't care about selling these tattered rubbish comics. But occasionally I'd get something like, I would get Brave and the Bold, and it had like Batman meets Adam Strange, and it would say down the bottom Australian edition. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? It meant it was all black and white inside, and it was real budget, but you got like 2 or 3 comics in one issue, so it was quite big. It was like 60 or 90 pages, like some of those older books.
That's cool. Yeah, it's interesting learning about these kind of regional.
But there was no new covers. There was only just I would say Australian edition, but that's it. There was no new artwork or anything like these.
Yeah. No, it's interesting knowing about these little regional differences when it came to these publications.
I was surprised because, like, by the by like at least say 95 or so in New Zealand, there weren't any more of these Australian editions you would see in the 80s. Then it was just the direct market comics at the comic shop, which would have like the difference would be where the barcode was. It'd be, you have a little graphic of Spider-Man's head instead of the barcode, go to the comic shop. Whereas the ones that did have the barcode, they will be the newsagent ones, but they will be exactly the same. Just the whatever the placement or image on the barcode will be different, but that was the only thing. Because I would go from the comic shop and they would go across town to a newsagent, and I would look at some comics in the mall and be like, oh, look, here's the exact same book, but it's uglier with this barcode on it because instead of being the direct market one.
I think that the Jackal must have taken some liberties when he was cloning Gwen Stacy, because I just don't remember her knockers.
Turning into Pam Anderson, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, he sculpted her genetics to make sure she turned out a Baywatch babe.
Yeah. Okay, so move on to the next one here. We've got another cool cover. Some John Byrne art. The Thing from his solo series in the 80s. It was a very cool series where Thing got his own book. And he's not someone you really think of getting a solo book now, but he's one of my all-time favorite characters. I think he's one of Marvel's best characters, full stop. Awesome cover. I wouldn't say the best cover ever, but it's just cool. It's just like The Thing. It's like, you know, it's like a Hulk cover. It's just a big, strong guy, big logo, looking powerful. And love the cover, love the character. And I recently was able to get the omnibus edition that reprints this series in full. It's like 20 or 30 issues, something like that. I've only ever read a couple of them before, so I'm real happy to be able to read the full run of this thing now. And he's just such a brilliant character. And I feel like, I mean, once we got out of the 80s, I mean, there's been decent modern Fantastic Four stories. There's like Jonathan Hickman and other people have done some cool stories in it. But I feel like the Thing just, he's not, since the 70s and early 80s, he's not been so much an icon for Marvel. Most people today wouldn't know who the hell he was. Like, know who Hulk is, Wolverine is, Captain America. I mean, partly because they botched up those movies so many times. I mean, some people might have seen those. But he's no longer a big iconic sort of character. He's fallen down to like B and C status, like a Blade or a Ghost Rider, whereas he used to be like a more upper level sort of dude, before the, X-Men got real big and Spider-Man got, massively big again in the 90s. And
yeah, he's definitely fallen down the ladder in that respect. Like, even for me, like I like the Fantastic Four, but I really like the Thing. Like, he's the only
Mm.
character from the Fantastic Four that I have.
He's got more nuance to him than a lot of the Marvel characters. Like, you can do a big brawling fight story, like with a Hulk or a Wolverine, but you can have him. You could have a story just walking around the streets and reminiscing about the old days and Yancey Street and the old gangs and all this, and or you could have a story to do with like when he used to be a football guy, or you know, and then you had the blind girlfriend, Alicia Masters. He's got so many different layers to him, and so many different kind of stories you can tell, that stories that you wouldn't do with a Wolverine or a Batman or a Spawn. Like, he's more of a human being who just happens to be this terrible bloody monster. He's not like someone who's running around trying to be super heroic, or, you know, having all the usual conventions of superhero stuff. He's just more like a regular dude.
He is, though, deserving of top billing, or at least a higher billing than where he is currently.
Yeah.
Because, like you were saying, like, it's not like, it wouldn't be out of place to see him standing alongside Hulk. Like, he's like the star player, really, of that team, like the standout kind of character. But it's because of that messing around with licenses, and especially now in the movie age, like, Fantastic Four has been fumbled so many times, and now the Thing has kind of become a casualty of that, where like his status is just totally reduced in the eyes of
your Thing hands on discount that are just repainted Hulk hands at the shops.
One thing though I like about this cover, and it's you know, obviously of the style of the time, unlike in the 90s when they're just getting really desperate to shill as much as possible. Like, I like here the way it just says first collector's item issue, and it just leaves it at that. It doesn't have to try and give it like a foil cover or like anything extra, or like
triple
just like,
foil,
no,
hollow embossed die cut cover.
Here it is. This is what it is. It's the Thing. He's got his own series now. Check it out.
I've got the omnibus sitting in the drawer that's next to my bed, just so because I take the dust cover off and I put it in the drawer so it keeps it clean, and put the dust cover away because it takes a while to read it. And I just read it now and then. It's like, it's a really good edition, the reprint they did of it, and it's all in the proper order, and there's cool covers in there. And it's, I never thought I'd ever own it, and it's got in the back, as well as this series, it's got some bonus stories. In the, I think it was the 80s and into brought it into the 90s. They did Marvel graphic novels, which were all like prestige format books. So were kind of a bit bigger, fancy artwork, one shots. There was Spider-Man one. There's there's one that's just Hulk and Thing, and they go to this alien planet and they fight all weird monsters and stuff. And it's like I think it's like Bernie Wrightson or someone on the art with like amazing art, and it's like, and that's one of the cool reprints that's hiding as a bonus extra in the back of that omnibus edition for the Thing.
That's cool. Now this is a fucking ring, you mooks.
Yeah, because that's a reference to that old cartoon.
The Thing gets a decent ring, and it rhymes.
I was trying to remember the name of that, who the other person working on the omnibus was. Yeah, it was a lot of John Byrne stories. Yeah, mostly John Byrne stories on the Thing.
No, beautiful cover. I have actually seen this one recently on like a large canvas print. It did look very nice, I must say.
Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrightson. I was trying to remember who the other person was that worked on the Thing Hulk graphic novel. So it's Bernie Wrightson artwork and Jim Starlin writing. So you get weird, they're on another planet, you get weird, bizarre looking monsters and stuff, and they're drawn by like horror master Bernie Wrightson. So it's awesome, because those old Marvel graphic novels are all out of print. They did about 25 of them. I've got dodgy digital version of them saved somewhere, but probably that hard drive will die one day. But the Marvel graphic novels are awesome. Like God Loves, Man Kills, that they used for the first X-Men movies, came from those Marvel graphic novels.
Yeah, that was a class one. Some PF now, some Transformers. First one here is definitely a well-known one if you're a Transformers fan.
Yeah, that one's like the most well-known Transformers comic book cover ever. It's like,
and another one that's kind of been maybe not so much officially homage, but loads of fans have done their own like
yeah, they've recreated with the
takes of
toys
this.
and done their little graphic
Yeah,
designs with the toy, recreating that cover. And but yeah, it's an awesome image, and like it's I read in there's been so many reprints of these comics over the years. Sometimes they have new introductions and interviews of people who worked on them. And however, I don't remember the name of the guy who came up with the cover, but even he said he was kind of surprised. They just kind of like threw it together at the last minute, and it turned out, and then became this like massively iconic cover that people still think of and reference many years later. And it kind of like took them by surprise because it's just kind of something they did at crunch time at the last minute, you know.
One of the ones I saw recently, it was Bumblebee instead of Shockwave, and it's just like instead of "are all dead," it just says "are all B."
What
But
B?
I
All
know
a
it's so
fun, more
it was
likely
so
was B.
random. Yeah,
And you
I
can
love
tell on this artwork too. It's the toy based art rather than the cartoon models.
yes, yeah, it's the old Radio Shockwave there on the
Yeah,
cover.
he's even got like the transparency on the gun hand, which it's obviously not really transparent, but on the toy it was clear plastic, and they've even done that quite well with the artwork.
Some really nice examples of the Transformers UK covers here.
Yeah, I own those two. The actual comics I bought off eBay for about $5 each because they were not in the best condition. The cover was in perfect condition, but the interior someone had cut out a mail away offer, and there might have been a ripped page. But they're about $5 each. And the cool thing about the UK ones is they're big magazine size, much bigger than American comic books. So they go really well. You just chuck them in a bag and board, and you get some stiff cardboard of them and put it on the wall, and it looks great. Or in an actual proper frame if you want to spend some money.
I might be just like a product of my environment or whatever, but I do have a preference for the UK Transformers comics over the American ones.
Well, there's like 130 something of them compared to 80 of the American ones.
Yes.
And most of them are much nicer artwork because they're done as a fancy cover, whereas a lot of the Marvel US Transformers covers, they're not particularly great art. The models are off a lot from the characters because they just do their own kind of model in the comic compared to the cartoon, and often the colors are completely off on a lot of the characters as well.
But the middle image of Impactor fighting with Springer, it's fantastic. Like it's
zombie Impactor.
Yes.
Because he gets infected by some kind of robo-virus, but basically he's a zombie. That's why he's falling apart.
But even our final one here, and this really kind of encompasses what you're saying. Like it's with Death's Head and Hot Rod, it feels more like it should be the cover of an actual book or a graphic novel rather than just a single issue. Even though they would often
did a whole bunch of covers with some Death's Head that look great.
Yeah, fantastic. I really, really wish I could find a affordable version of that Marvel Legends Death's Head they released a while ago. I'd love it. That's in the collection.
Yeah, I wanted to get one, but the old one and the new one, both versions are expensive and unavailable here. So,
yeah, so
and how cool is the logo look above the Death's Head? Like the logo,
I love it.
Real nice.
Absolutely love it. And look, this is another one of those runs where we probably could have grabbed any number of random covers from UK Transformers, and they'd all be worthy.
So heap of cool Dinobots ones.
Yeah, some really nice ones. I do like when
I have another one. I have a third one. I think it's the one where it's like Grimlock fighting Shockwave on the cover.
Yeah, and for a little while, for the first kind of bit of the run, the UK Transformers were just repeating stories from the American comics. And then I believe what happened was at some point there was a delay in getting the American publications over to be reprinted. So then that's when Simon Furman and a bunch of the UK guys started writing their own stuff. Yeah, pretty early on. But yeah,
so that's why it runs for so many more issues, because they would print or they would reprint the American comic, but rather than reprint the entire book, they might reprint 8 or 10 pages of it and serialize it sort of week to week or whatever, and then add new pages for a UK story. So anyone looking up online, there's like the TFUS or Transformers US Marvel that was like 80 or 82 issues or whatever. You look at the UK one, it's like 130 something. Think, oh man, there must be a much longer run. Like, no, it's a shorter run. There's less pages, but they're serialized in shorter amounts. But there's 100 and whatever covers because of the way it's done. There's all these extra covers, and you also got like Action Force and GI Joe. Sometimes would be in the second half of the book as well.
Yeah, I was just about to say that I do.
They're not in the same story. Much to my disappointment. I was like, oh great, they're going to be teaming up, but.
Yeah, sometimes it'd be Action Force. I believe for a while as well, they'd bundle in like Visionaries or whatever other kind of
Spider-Man. I don't know if Spider-Man. No. Sorry, that was another one. Spider-Man and Zoids. That was the one.
Yes, Spider-Man and.
But
Zoids,
I was like, oh, cool. I had a Zoid. Is Spider-Man going to meet the Zoids? No, it was just two entirely unrelated stories. I was very disappointed with that one. Have to make it up in their head.
Yeah, they're teasing you. No, yeah, I love the UK run of the Transformers comics. Fantastic, really. We could probably even one day do an episode just on UK Transformers. It's that expansive.
Oh, easy. I've got most of them in those bloody modern collections they did, and I mean, I've whined and griped like a little bitch before about how many volumes are missing out of 80 something volumes, but I've got the majority of them.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat, except it's with the US versions. I had been collecting a run of them, and then it had stopped. So, but you know,
I have read them all. I've read like all the Marvel US ones from the original run right up through Regeneration 1. I've read them pretty much all twice, and I've read all the complete UK run right through as well as every other Transformers comic in existence, except for whatever they've done the last 2 years. I haven't read.
And I almost and once again, maybe it can be another show sometime, but I almost even threw in a couple of G2 Transformers covers originally.
Yeah, I was almost going to do that as well, because they did. I don't know the name of the artist, but one of the artists who worked on it was also another horror artist, and they did like real cool body horror stuff with the Transformers that's so over the top, little oil spraying out like zombie splatter everywhere.
There's a really iconic cover with Megatron holding Bludgeon's head in his hand.
Yeah, that's cool.
Cover. Really
and
nice.
I love the crossover where they did. It was G2 Megatron. He got trashed and becomes the Green Tank, and it crossed over from Transformers to the actual GI Joe Marvel comic that issue that month, and it explained that Cobra rebuilt him into the Green Tank. That's actually in the story. That was cool.
That is cool. Nice little setup there for the G2 verse.
And you have the cool cover where it's got Cobra Commander and Megatron with the big giant green tank Megatron.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
I almost bought those on eBay as well. They were cheap, and I should have got them because I wanted to chuck them on the wall for those covers.
Yeah, if you see them again for a reasonable price, you should definitely pick them up.
They were quite cheap. This was only last year. They were apparently quite common and cheap. And
yeah, I still.
You still can get quite a few Transformers UK comics around. Like there's enough of them around. You can sometimes pick up cheap ones and get them for a fair price.
Yeah, they're pretty reasonable to pick up, especially if you live on this side of the world. They're still readily available.
I was surprised I could actually get some in Australia because I've never seen them here, like, other than the ones I purchased on eBay. But I think it was like a comic shop in Melbourne or something that had them.
Yeah, I'd imagine they had pretty limited distribution over on that side of the world.
Yeah, I don't know if they were ever actually released here or not, because or someone's imported them or whatever.
Yeah, no, it just depends on where and when you existed, really. If you actually got a chance to see some of this stuff in the flesh.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate, really. Like growing up in New Zealand, not exactly a big comic book loving country. I mean, different now. They've had some conventions and vintage toy expos and things, primarily in the North Island, which I've seen on like Kiwi GI Customs channel. He's been to a few things like that. But when I was a kid, there was nothing. There was nothing like that. There was the car show. Like, I mean, actual real cars, not die-cast cars. There was a car show go to with my dad, and I might go to the Air Force Museum. There was no comic book convention. There was no pop culture. There was nothing like that. Absolutely nothing.
After today's show, I'm going to learn some lightning jiu-jitsu so I can
Yes.
have the secret weapon, and then I'll be able to overcome any attack and win any fight.
What you should do is get an issue of Boba Joe comics. What you do, you should get it, roll it up so it becomes a circle, jab it into the throat or the eyes. Any comic book or magazine become an instant weapon. Didn't hear about that here, kids.
No. Kids, get your parents' permission first before you jab them in the neck with a rolled up comic. Maybe I'll pay $1 so I can have conversation made easy, or the key to space travel, perhaps.
I'll make up my own ads, and I'll be like $1 to make a conversation more difficult, just like any conversation from my real life. Anything work related.
Yeah, man, these ads are wacky. I was silently reading bits and pieces of them all while we were doing our show today. I have to say, they're hilarious.
Yeah, I got these ones from. I mean, obviously, from people have scanned comics and such, they're online on various places. But these ones were from 1960s Charlton Comics, and these particular ones were from issue 22 or 23 of Konga, which is like the knockoff King Kong character that got a movie in. And apparently a whole comic series that ran for about 20 plus issues. They had quite nice art. But the ads are awesome.
The ads are awesome. You get a free.
There was stuff about bloody hypnotize anyone and draw illustrations and all kinds of things.
Some seahorses there for Weird Bill to
manage. Yeah, he loves his seahorses riding around his underwater Aquaman kingdoms on weekends. You don't know what kind of mischief he gets up to.
Yeah, taking the submarine to Atlantis and ruling his underwater kingdom.
Yeah, watch out for Batman stolen away when he's not busy having science fiction adventures.
No, that was good. I love looking at those covers, and as I've repeated a few times now, like they were just our own personal choices. We probably could have done a different collection or a different selection, but let us know.
Oh, easy. You could go like top 100 Spider-Man or Batman covers, or by decade, or by artist. There's so many ways you could go.
Definitely, ladies and gentlemen, do let us know what your own personal favorite comic covers are, what you think the greatest ones are, or just your favorites. We're dying to know. So enlighten us with your comments and your memories.
Thanks for tuning in.
Do we have any topic for next week? Or are we going
to? I haven't got a specific topic, so if you want to throw something else out there, you're welcome to. I mean, I've got other ones planned for down the track. There's not in a rush. I'm kind of just keeping a bit free format at the moment. I was tempted thinking of next week, like print magazines, which sounds a bit vague, but I want to ask you though, have you read much print magazines, but like 80s, 90s, and then obviously stuff? I go up there now and it's all bloody car magazines and garden, not much else. Has there been any magazines that you really enjoyed or used to enjoy that like have a memory or?
Yeah, I used to enjoy a lot of, I suppose you would call it like movie and television related stuff.
Yeah, I get like we had the Australian edition of Empire, which was a UK magazine.
Yeah, Empire, Total Film, even things like for a while there was a magazine over here called Area 51. I used to buy it. It was specifically for collectors.
There used to be so many, like from 95 through 2005, there was still a shitload of magazines, and it's gone down and down and down to virtually nothing now.
You know what? No, that could be a good one. And if you leave it with me for a few days, and I'll get the old memory juices flowing.
Like I read, like 90s for me was mostly video game magazines. 2000, 2010, I was reading when I had actual money. I actually got later on, I got subscriptions to 2 different film magazines and 2 video game magazines. So I had 4 monthly magazines. I used to get them like every month, and I loved it for years and years. I've still got stacks of them sitting around here.
The video game magazines, that's something that's unlocked a few memories already. So
yeah. I used to have my old EGM 2 with Thanos on the cover from Marvel Superheroes.
Yeah, well, look, folks, we've got a rough idea about where we're going next week. So
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll be joining us there. And once again, though, definitely let us know what your favorite comic book covers were and all that good stuff.
Yeah, tell us some of your favorites, and we'll catch you guys next time.
See you later, folks.
Wrong outro. That was the one for the Cody show. Here we go. Real outro.